Get started. Welcome to the September 15th, 2014 ECHO NAT session. Today we'll actually have part 2 of our AT considerations process that will be presented by some of the PLC members. And we actually have a whole slew of people who are unable to attend today, whether they're not feeling well or, once again, as we talked about last time, there's MAP testing going on. So starting next week, we should have about probably 10 additional sites that will be joining us. But we learned, that's part of our, I guess, this expanded pilot, is that we're learning along the way. And we will probably not start this next year until later on in September, knowing that there's quite a few individuals getting pulled out. But there's lots of people that are really excited about these AT considerations, about the presentation that you guys will be working on today. We'll actually be taking it, splicing it, and posting it on the website. Because it's such a great complement to what you guys have already done. So thank you for, as always, joining us and be willing to be involved. So we'll start with some introductions. So I'm Canyon Hardesty. I am the Coordinator of Community Education here at Water, and I'm your facilitator for 2014-2015. So if we want to go to Gail. Would you let us know who you are?
Oregon, and I am the lead trainer for the ECHO project, which means I get to work with all the trainers as they get prepared to do their sessions.
Great to have you with us. And then we'll go to Barb. Barb, we can't hear you. Okay, Barb Locke, and she's a member of the water team. She'll be joining us remotely, and apparently we may need somebody to interpret for her as we go through the session. So if your audio works a little bit later, Barb, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, how about we go to Billy?
I just need to teach Barb sign language, that's all. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone's well today. I'm Billy Wortham with the Department of Education, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Outreach. I am an audiologist by training, and my office is in Riverton.
Great. Thanks for joining us today. How about Laura?
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Ozias Townsend. I'm also with the Wyoming Department of Education. I'm with Vision Outreach Services, and I am in Casper.
Great to have you. Now we can go to some of our PLC members. We have Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Victor from Bighorn County 1. Today from beautiful Cowley instead of Burlington. Switched my schedule this week. And I'm one of the PLC members and a speech language pathologist by training.
Great. Thanks for joining us. How about Annie?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I'm Annie Bowers. I'm a speech language pathologist in Sheridan County School District number 2. I'm a PLC member and I'm excited to be here.
Great. How about Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Freeman. I'm in Casper and I'm assistive technology strategist.
Great. And then we have Casey, and it looks like some additional crew members from Fremont.
Casey Widhelm, Fremont County School District number 1 case manager and AT coordinator, and with me I have Carrie Polson, a case manager for the middle school and alternative high school, and Jessica Waldron, speech language pathologist. And joining us shortly will be Ellen Holzman, also a speech language pathologist.
Great, thanks so much, Casey. Okay, so what I think we'll go ahead and do is we'll turn it over, I think, back to Casey, because he's going to drive, right, the presentation, and we will jump right into the second part of the AT consideration process. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes, great, Casey.
Okay, as we talked about last week, this consideration packet and recommendation to the state was developed by a group of us, some PLC members, as well as Barb Locke, and Gail helped us out quite a bit as well. Again, we had just talked about this, but that none of that has changed since we introduced ourselves, so we'll jump into something else. Chris, you want to talk about this? Did you have a talking point here?
No talking points here. Just
Okay. Just as the disclaimers. So again, thanks to Daniel Cochran for allowing us to use his process and letting us adapt it. And Ira Sokol, did I pronounce that correctly?
I think so, yes.
For the tool belt theory piece.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll just go ahead and jump in here if I can for a minute. So when we're talking about Ira Sokol's theory, when we're talking about a tool belt theory, the idea is that we all come to tasks with a bunch of tools. If we were going to be doing a home improvement project or something like that, we might each have a hammer, but your hammer might look different than my hammer. Maybe my hammer is a little bit shorter. Maybe my hammer weighs a little bit less because I'm not as strong as you are. So we each have a tool belt, but my tool belt might look a little bit different than yours. And I just have a quick little anecdote here. One of my first speech language placements as a graduate student, I was at UCP, and I was working with a speech language pathologist who was in charge of all of the speech generating devices for the clients. And she had asked me to open up her top drawer to grab something for her. And when I did, I was really surprised at what I saw. There was a collection of screwdrivers, and there was Velcro and all kinds of things in there. And she looked at me and she said, well, what did you expect? Bubbles and stickers? Because even as speech pathologists, we have different tools for different jobs. And so we choose and refine the tools in our toolkit or tool belt based on our needs and based on our preferences. And that's true for the folks we work with, and that's true for us as clinicians and teachers as well. And there are some tools that some people will need that other people maybe don't need. For example, when I was working in Baltimore, a long time ago, I had a student who was using a macaw communication device. And so we adapted this macaw a little bit by creating a folder that went on the back so that the overlays could always be with that device. So, you know, that was kind of added to the student's tool belt so that he had those overlays with him at all times. Well, whenever I would come in to see this student, I'd find a popsicle stick in this folder. I'm like, what's up with the popsicle stick? This is bizarre. And so I'd throw it out each time. I just thought it was something that the kid was doing. You know, he finished his lunch, finished his popsicle, tossed that in there instead of the trash. Well, one week his aide said to me, what do you keep doing with my popsicle sticks? And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize they were yours. She says, I need that to pop the top off of the macaw in order to change the overlay. She had beautiful, long, manicured nails and was not going to mess up that manicure by working with this student, but she knew that it was important to keep switching those overlays throughout his conversations and throughout his day. And what I didn't recognize was that there was a tool for that job. I used my own stubby little fingers with my stubby little nails, and I don't have a problem getting in there and getting dirty and breaking nails. But she did. She needed a different tool, and that's okay. Okay, so last week we talked a lot about the problem identification, and we talked about analyzing the problem and the different pieces to that. This week we're going to pick it up with that same graph that we were looking at last week, but we're going to be moving into the next step of that. So we're going to be looking at task demands and task analysis. So what are the skills that are needed to accomplish this task? And by skills, we're talking about cognitive skills. Does the student have the cognitive skills in order to accomplish the task? Does he have the physical skills? I presented on a student last spring who physically could not make it through the entire school day. So certainly for that student with a writing task or something like that, they're going to need some help. They're going to need a special tool in order to accomplish the task just because of those physical demands. And also the linguistic skills. Does the student have the linguistic skills in order to accomplish the task, both in following the directions and then being able to produce whatever's being asked of? Okay, so then the next piece is, what are the critical elements of the task? There are some things that need to happen with a task, but are they critical? For example, last week I talked about a student being able to answer a question verbally, but having a lot of trouble putting that into an essay that they might need to write out on a worksheet or on a test paper or whatever. So a critical element of that task might be producing that written answer. A non-critical element of the task might be producing that answer in the space provided. Perhaps it's okay that this student uses a word processor or something else in order to construct that answer, and then that can be printed out and attached. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that little space if that's not a critical element. So those would just be some questions to ask. And then what are the outcome expectations? In Wyoming, we talk about curriculum standards, and there's a lot of talk about the CCSC, but also in Wyoming we have performance standards. And so this was one that I took from the 4th grade Wyoming Language Arts 2011 Content and Performance Standards. So for writing, when writing informative or explanatory pieces, the student uses facts, concrete details, quotations, illustrations, headings, definitions, precise language, and domain-specific vocabulary to introduce and develop a topic, and also provides an organizational structure to convey ideas and information clearly, including using transitional words and phrases, and a conclusion related to the information or explanation presented. Okay, so if we're talking about a student who is included in regular education, but needs those supports, those are the outcome expectations. That's what the student needs to be able to produce. And then are there time constraints? Are we trying to get something in place so that when this student takes the SAWS test or the PAWS test or MAP testing or whatever, that this will be in place for them? Because it needs to be on the IEP for a certain amount of time before that student can use it in testing. Is it being used as part of does it need to be in place and natural enough for the student to use, that when they're taking maybe a performance assessment, as they do in some of the high schools, which is a requirement for graduation, building that portfolio. So what's the time constraint? Is this something that's coming up every day in class and we need to have this going, like we're going to try to get this done so the student can start using it tomorrow? Do we have a little lead time? What's the time constraint? Casey, do you want to add anything?
No, I don't think so. Did
Okay.
nice job.
Okay, so the next piece of this is the environmental factors. And it seems like we talk a lot about this, but it is really important. Where does the task need to be done? If we're talking about an included student, is this task going to be done in the classroom with everybody else? Is that student going to be doing this in the class but away from other folks in the class? Or is this student going to be removed to a resource room so that they can do the task there and then return to the class? What are the barriers in the environment? We talk about inaccessible design, environmental materials, things like that. Just thinking about the space that I'm in today, which is very different than my Burlington space. This room is near the lunchroom. So there is like an hour-and-a-half window where this room is not a great place to work with a student who has distraction issues. Is it near the bathroom? Is it near the band room? All these kinds of things can really add to distractions. So if that's the problem that your student is that your student is working with. Those would be considerations. So room-specific background noises, task-specific. Is there a lot of pair share going on? Because sometimes that can be a barrier. If a kiddo is really auditorily distracted, they may not be able to concentrate on the conversation that's happening right there with their peer because there's so much going on in the background. And then there are other things like lighting, seating and positioning. Is this a kiddo who in this class, in this environment, needs to do a lot of near point, far point? These are all environmental considerations that need to be considered. Sorry, that's a little redundant. Okay, policy, practice, and attitude barriers. Sometimes, you know, you're working with someone, and whether that's administration or that's the teacher, and you know, this is how we do it. This is how we do it in my class. And so the student just needs to do it. Well, we want the student to be able to do it. And as the teacher, of course, you want the student to be able to do it as well. When we're talking about assistive technology, we're not talking about making it easier. We're talking about making it possible. And so those are kind of some psychological hurdles that may need to be worked through within your district or within that classroom with that teacher. And also knowledge and skills by the teachers. You know, when teachers are going through school, they have so much that they have to learn about their own specific area and such. And, you know, with each of our kids, we know our kids and what they're coming in with and stuff. They might be the expert on math, but we can help be the expert on that child and what that child needs. So there's a lot of teaching and coaching that can go along with that.
And I just want to add in there too, Chris, those last 2 star points, that attitude barrier, just like a lot of our students that we work with, is due to that lack of knowledge and their insecurity with dealing with, especially assistive technology that's constantly changing and all of the time. And so hopefully within districts and through ECHO and building AT in Wyoming, we can alleviate some of that through training different pieces there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that, I mean, those attitude barriers can also be on the student's part as well. I don't want to look different in the classroom. You know, so there's an education piece there that we can help with. Okay, so the next piece would be looking at low to high-tech considerations. And on one of the handouts that I think Canyon sent out this week is the document that our group worked on, the Assistive Technology Consideration Work Group Recommendations. And in the B forms, you know, there we are. We're trying to help you out by giving you some ideas on low to high-tech considerations. So if these forms are helpful for you, awesome. That's why we did them. If you have something else you like better, awesome. Go for it. Use that. But also going back to, sorry, I don't mean to be moving papers, but I am. But there's also a chart considering assistive technology as an intervention strategy. There's a consider AT chart within that. And I'm sorry, I don't have, we didn't do a great job with the page numbers, Casey. But it's like the third from the end on that document.
Third from the end, okay.
Yeah, at the top it says integrating assistive technology into the problem-solving process.
Okay. And I just want to add in there while I'm scrolling too, if you're looking at one of these, this document that's up on the screen right now, and if you're looking from left to right, you can kind of consider that like a, excuse me, like a least restrictive continuum, with the left being the least restrictive stuff that is done normally and every day, and then all the way on the right would be like where some pretty high-tech assistive technology pieces, and in between is different things that can also be done in the classroom just as a tiered type of intervention.
Absolutely, and looking at universal design as well.
Right. This guy?
No, past that.
More?
Past that one, sorry. Past that. There's another page that looks like that too. Yep, past that. Okay, at the, what?
Right here. Let me zoom
okay.
up.
Okay, so right there. So where it says plan development and implementation, that really goes along with that chart that Casey was just showing you. So consider instruction all the way over to considering tools. So that's kind of enveloped in that other chart that Casey just showed you. Okay, so now if you flip to the next page, there you go, at the bottom, okay, where it says consider assistive technology as an intervention strategy. Okay, and this goes along with the slide that we're talking about now. So that consideration chart on your PowerPoint, this is what it's talking about, number 5. Okay, so when you come up to this point, you've identified the problem, you've analyzed the problem, you've looked at environmental factors, you've talked about what the student is able to do. Do they have those cognitive, linguistic, physical skills that they need? And now we're looking at assistive technology. So the question is assistive technology needed to achieve the goals and curricular expectations? And if you say no, okay, well, instruction and accommodations are sufficient then. Is that the case? If that's the case, I wonder what made you ask the question to begin with. And I'd maybe want to do a little bit more with that. But maybe you're thinking about it now and thinking about those first 4 parts in that last chart we just showed you and thinking, you know what, we have some of these things universally available in our school, or I can tweak my instruction method just a little bit and this student will be fully included and accommodated. Okay, so maybe that's it. No, we don't really need to look at assistive technology at this point. Okay, yes, go ahead and implement and start progress monitoring. Maybe that little column in the middle, well, that's where you can use this consideration guide to match the features and generate some solutions. Test drive your options and then ask the question again. And then get the tools and assistance from an AT specialist as needed. Some other things to consider with AT services is not just the devices, of course, but also maintaining the equipment, training and technical assistance on the use of the device, both for the kiddo who's using them and also for the staff that's working with that kiddo. And then working with parents, because presumably this kiddo is going to be doing some homework, or if it's communication, communication happens everywhere. It's not just a speech-language bias, it's the truth. And then remember to do an ongoing review of the assistive technology use, because things do change over time and the student's preferences and skills may change as well. Okay, so then for our documentation, you have the AT consideration guide, and there's a link for it right there. It's up on the water site. The educator and district resources and assistive technology consideration packet. And then, of course, there's an assistive technology checklist also included in there. And we love checklists because those are nice and quick and easy to do, and they give us a place to really start and to start asking some questions. And in conclusion, we really like to thank the folks who worked on this committee: Annie Barnes, Molly Hanson, Barb Locke. We couldn't have done this without you guys. So Casey and I thank you for letting us present this, but this was really a group effort.
Yep, thank you. The end.
Perfect. That was great. That was great, guys. What questions do you guys have for the group, or just about the process? Or it looks like individuals in the conference room were able to join. So hi, everybody. But what questions do you guys have, or comments, or?
Can you hear us, Canyon?
Yeah.
Right. I'll put it back on.
Well, no, don't put it back on mute. Maybe somebody has a question.
So we missed a little bit of the beginning piece, but I like the process you're going through, Chris. A lot of times when I'm working with accessible instructional materials, you know, a request comes in, but the teacher or educator doesn't actually know how to get Daisy to play on a laptop or a computer. So it's this whole process of, you know, really just it's not just AIM that I deliver. It's, you know, how do you set up your AT? How do you do Daisy playback on a laptop versus iPad? there's so much training that goes on in consideration too. What software is going to be the best fit for that student, and what technology they're using. So I like this process that you have up here, because it is an involved process. I find I'm always amazed when I get an request in, and then how much education has to go in, like with an educator, like how do you use Daisy, or how do you use digital text, how to use Kurzweil. So that's my input.
Thanks, JP. Gail, did you have a comment or another question, or no?
There, that's better. I was curious, anybody who was on the team who developed this packet, or anybody in Wyoming, have you had experience with rolling it out? And if you have, what are the steps that you would recommend that people take to get this process or the information available to people in your districts?
Great, Annie. I was waiting. I was going to call on you if you didn't raise your hand.
I thought that was a great lead-in. Thanks, Gail. We actually, while I was working with the AT consideration team, which was incredible, thanks guys, we were actually going through that process in our district. And so with the PLC team's help and AT consideration subcommittee's help, I was able to implement a manual that has our AT process, including the consideration, and then on into evaluation and procedures to follow from there. We did use the Daniel Cochran format, so it is implemented. Something really cool that they've done this fall now, so we created that all last year, created our district AT team, and just it just keeps growing and growing, which is incredible. We now have an intranet for our district, and within there, under special education, there's an AT option, and under there now, the manual is able to be gotten. I'm not thinking of really good words right now. Everybody in our district, special ed teams, even regular ed, is able to access that manual and the tools for the AT consideration, as well as the referral process. Our referral form is on there, framing the question. So it continues on. We have websites that our teachers are able to access and resource providers, plus the tool belt and all the AT continuum process, things that are within our manual, as well as, oh gosh, anything. I mean, the SET framework is on there that we pull from. So now, instead of us just talking about it, our district employees are able to access that. So it's been pretty powerful in our district, and we're able to continue participating in the ECHO project. I've had several resource providers come to me now, that have gone through the AT process and are kind of stuck, and what do we do now? So another step for us is to use our ECHO project and case presentations for recommendations, and then further go into our district AT team. So it's been extremely powerful. Thank you.
Wow. That's great. And I will say that your district is working on, kind of an article that talks about a lot of what Annie talks about to be distributed through our water waves. And so that'll go out to, about 500 or 600 individuals we have on our mailing list, but be a really good opportunity. And also want to give you guys a heads up, because it will have, all the questions will come directly to me, but then I'll be forwarding them out to the AT considerations group if there are any other questions that come of the article that Annie's working on that don't need to go directly to her district, but that will come back to this larger group of people. So I hope there are lots of questions, or lots of interest at least, because there's lots of experience to pull from people who are sitting on this group. Anybody else have any comments or want to respond to how they've potentially used this in their district, either to enhance what they're already doing or? Really?
Well, I always like to talk. I guess I look at it, since I own my own practice for 21 years, in terms of not just marketing, but understanding the people we work with, that we might have a new teacher, we may have a teacher that moved in from another state, you know, just letting them know that what's available, letting know that there's a support system within the district. You know, the sustainability even of this project itself just depends on, like Annie says, getting the word out, keeping the word out, asking in an IEP meeting, have we considered assistive technology? All those things that I think a lot of teachers, they kind of know the term and they might know what it's about, but they're not necessarily familiar with what works in their district. So that's just more of a comment than anything. But I guess I see it from a marketing standpoint too, in terms of letting them know it's available, what's available, having the expertise of who says what's necessary. So that's all.
Great. Thank you. Gail?
You know, one of the things that both Annie and Billy made me think about is that the thing that's odd to me about consideration is that we ask people who may not know a lot about assistive technology to do it, and sometimes there's nobody in the room who does know about assistive technology. So I think these consideration processes, the checklists, and particularly, as Chris said, those checklists that we love to help us get started, are so important for getting people started. But then once they have the experience 2 or 3 times of considering assistive technology, I think it does snowball. It does grow rapidly because teachers and parents and, you know, other educators are able to say, oh yeah, I remember that kid, and here's the process we used for that kid. And we can use that same process in a whole different subject. So building that kind of capacity is what makes an assistive technology program as sustainable in my mind. And I had one other thing I wanted to remind you, because somebody mentioned talking with parents. The new Wyoming Assistive Technology Pointers for Parents manual is available as a resource as you're doing some of this consideration, and it does have a section on how parents can participate in AT consideration. So that's another resource.
Yeah, we actually provided it quite frequently with the student recommendations last year, and we'll do the same this year as we start getting kind of back up and running. Additionally, I'd like everybody to know we have found somebody to translate, so that will be available in Spanish as well. It just will probably not be available in Spanish until, wow, there you go. Casey is showing the AT pointers for parents. We would all like to look at Casey Whittam. There you go. But that should be available in Spanish. And then we'll be asking the same thing we did. We'll print a number of copies for the members and our core districts. And then if additionally districts want to go ahead and order them, we will print them all at one time. But that should be available soon. So thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for bringing up both those points, Gail. Any other comments you guys have about the AT considerations process, or things that, as we have new districts who are watching this recording, what would they benefit from knowing from you guys who've been through this? What's one piece of information or advice that you would give to a new district who is either considering AT or kind of revamping like Annie did their entire AT world?
Okay, we've got Carrie Polson's got a comment.
I can just share a couple of things that we did in a previous district that I was in to get the AT team up and running. First, we decided what members, what areas we wanted represented on our AT team. OT, perhaps a vision specialist, speech language, case manager. So we developed our team that way. Then we had training. So we went to Closing the Gap. We worked with Barbara Locke on some pieces on where to get training in state. Had some folks from Afton come in and train us, and then Carrie Huddleston from Tahoe came in with information from their AT team. So we had training from outside resources. Then from there, we started developing a process in our district. So we started looking at consideration, developing the forms, rolling all of that out. And we spent a year doing this, putting this all together, looking at what equipment we had. At that time, we had ARA funds. We purchased a lot of equipment, developed a assistive technology para to keep track of that, checking it in, checking it out. So we developed the process, the forms, and then we rolled it out by training staff. So we had all staff meetings. We worked with staff in what the process was. Then we had our AT people available to go to team meetings at schools to help them in considering AT and what that process was. So that's how we rolled it out there, is we took the year in training the AT team and getting a firm foundation in place to then roll out district-wide.
Great.
And we had training from Gail. We did one summer. We had everybody on the AT team took online classes and participated with that. So even though she doesn't know it, she was a big part of getting that.
What's your district?
It's
Casey.
Sweetwater 1.
That was
Okay.
previous district.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Well, that's what I remember. Sweetwater being in those classes.
Yeah, we were there.
That's great. And hopefully
Got one comment.
next week. So Casey?
He's waving his hand for me. I just wanted to add to what I know in my previous district, what really helped, and Annie touched on it in her district, is that they had one location where people could access the forms. And I think maintaining good communication between all the team members, whether it's just between your building or if it's district-wide on whatever case you're working on, for that student to fill out the consideration forms, to go through the checklist, that was really helpful to have one location that we could go to, whether it be the district website or what have you, fill that out, and then have it kind of circulating within our team so we were all on the same page, rather than duplicating what somebody might have already done.
Great. Great. These are all great ideas. I'm glad I'm getting them recorded. Gail?
I just had one other thing I wanted to say. I've been reading a lot lately about what the federal government is calling implementation science. That's what they're calling it right now, but the science of how do you do something new and make it stick is what it feels like to me. And I think your comments about how many stages there are in starting a new AT team and the process for Sweetwater are really pertinent. The research that I've been reading says really to get something up and running and well established takes about 3 years. So that's probably a lesson for us as we build AT teams, and maybe even a lesson for us as we build ECHO. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting research. People are finally starting to look at what does it take to make change more permanent.